Welcome, everybody, to the Winners Circle Sports Betting Channel. My name is Ross Benjamin. I'm your host. It's Monday afternoon, July the 24th, and we're going to be covering Major League Baseball with Doug Upstone from DocSports.com. And, Doug, it's been a while. We had a little bit of a technical issue on our last broadcast, but I was able to do it myself, and I included your free pick, which, by the way, was a winner. Anyway, without further ado, how are you, Doug?
I'm doing well, Ross. And yeah, that was an unusual circumstance on that one. But technical things are part of the recording business. So just in general, and so yeah, that was a good one. And so ended up having a couple other nice free plays just overall on my site as well. So it's been pretty good. And Major League Baseball props continue to do extremely well. So I'm really happy about that. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But so we're good to go. And then we got the trade deadline next Monday. So there's going to be a lot of different things occurring. We'll see what different teams do this upcoming week. That's for sure.
Yeah, we'll see who the buyers and sellers are. We pretty much could nail that down based on franchise history and where teams are in the race. But it's still every year you're a little bit shocked to see somebody who might be a seller that's in playoff contention or currently in a playoff spot because of payroll. And maybe they just don't feel, even with their current roster, that they want to carry that type of payroll without a realistic chance of winning at all in their mind. And then there's always the team, and I think the Yankees will be one of those teams where they have a lot of holes to fill. And because they're the Yankees, they'll probably be a buyer. And it probably and when that tends to happen, Doug, and I want your take on that, that's where mistakes tend to happen, correct? When we run into situations like that.
Yeah, I mean, the Yankees are, like I said, the everyday lineup just isn't very good. Oh. I mean, and for example, John Sterling talks about it all the time, on the radio. I mean, I listen to him pretty frequently, and it isn't a good team. And so, their record is indicative basically of who they are. They just don't score enough runs. And even if they got Ohtani, I mean, one guy isn't going to change the whole thing. That would just mean there's one less hole than what they had before.
If Stanton was hitting, Doug, it would be one thing. But he hasn't broke out of what seems to be a season-long slump. It isn't, but you know what I'm trying to say. He's certainly not living up to A, his contract, or B, the standards he set before him. Now, if he was hitting and providing ample amount of power and and putting up the type of power numbers he's been consistently doing throughout his career, that would be one thing. And then you add Judge coming back. Who knows when he's coming back? And then if you add Ohtani, okay, now you got something cooking at the 3, 4, and 5 hole that could do a lot of damage. However, who's going to be the leadoff hitter? Gleyber Torres is having a decent season, but we mentioned this time and time again. I just think that he's a kid that needs a change of scenery. He came out of the box real strong in his rookie season, and he looked like he had stardom written all over him, and it just hasn't panned out that way. But having said all that, you know what? We talked this morning with Chip on our show, and we'll be back with Doug and Chip on Thursday afternoon. By the way, folks, we'll be talking Major League Baseball. We talked about our upbringing and at what point early on in our youth or teen years did we, or even early adulthood, did we realize, and there was maybe a pivotal moment which we gained a huge love and passion for not only the world of sports, but more in particular, the world of sports betting. I know I'm putting you on the spot with this question, but can you recall off the top of your head at maybe one instance where you could say, you know what, this is what I want to do. This is what I love.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of them. I'll make them brief as possible. As a kid, I loved to play with numbers, okay, and in a variety of ways. Heavily involved in sports because my father was heavily involved in sports. My dad was a big Cubs fan, so that's the one thing he gave me that was the curse for by and large most of my life. But I always did. I just always, whether it be the baseball cards, all of those types of things, always involved in that. In terms of sports betting, I remember my dad used to bring home where he worked in a factory, and he'd bring home the parlay cards. Okay. And I always looked at them, and I always, and he didn't really want me looking at them. So I would, kind of sneak them, get them out and write down the numbers just to see what would happen in the games. Okay. Yeah. Then later on. And then, as then I was in the golf business for a long time, and obviously around a lot of gambling type stuff, in back in those days. And then I remember them started Game Plan magazine. Do you remember that?
I do vaguely, but I do recall the name.
Yep. And I actually got to meet the guy and got to know him pretty well. That had that. But that was my first indoctrination into developing power ratings, because he had power ratings for both college and pro football, 2 different magazines. And so I started formulating a process just for my own, I was betting some at the time, but not much. But I liked the going about how to do it. And that's always, to this day, remains the case. I like the process probably much more even than just the actual outcomes of games, because the process to me was the more interesting thing, because it was out of your hands with the randomness of outcomes from time to time. So I did that, and I think of this often. We had a party. This is going to be hard for you to believe. We had a party at our house. This was probably in the late 90s, and so everybody was having a good time. And I walked up to this one guy, said, "You know what? You see all those guys that are handicappers on TV? I'm going to be a handicapper on TV one day too. Okay, might not be in their league, but I'm going to do that too." And that's the honest to God truth. And it wasn't that many years later, I went that direction. Still working in golf, but then I started my own handicapping site and went that direction.
I would say that you exceeded expectations if you were telling yourself, "I don't know if I'll be in that league." Especially when you go back to the mid 90s and early 90s. I mean, look, there were guys that are still legitimate to this day. Scotty Spreitzer comes to mind from at your site, docsports.com. And but there was a lot of shysters too. And those were the days when there was limited internet and was still in its infant stages, and people still haven't wrapped their head around how to utilize it properly. So there wasn't a lot of checks and balances in our business back then. And unfortunately, a lot of guys took advantage of that, used to take out big USA Today ads and come up with some astronomical record that we know is unattainable, like 88-17. I've won 60 in a row, all that kind of just nonsense. I remember those days vividly back in. I remember watching one guy that comes to mind is Mark Lawrence. I mean, he's still legitimate to this day, and he was on TV. And actually, he was, a major force in me getting interested in this business. You mentioned numbers and math, and I know a lot of people go, numbers don't mean anything. Well, you tell me a handicapper or somebody who looks at games and doesn't have some kind of mathematical equation or number-related equation that they use in their daily process. I'll tell you a guy that's shortcutting the process. Like I always like to say, numbers don't lie, liars don't figure. And that certainly is what Doug is. He's a numbers guy, so am I. Chip talked about it today, numbers guy. And you're right. I mean, I don't know if it's almost like it gets to the point where I enjoy the challenge on a daily basis more than I do the actual wins. And again, that sounds far-fetched, but that's how much we love just handicapping games, developing systems, developing why we came to the conclusion we do. And you hear me and Doug talking all the time that, on occasion you tweak what's been working for you before. It's not quite working the same now, but without making an abrupt tweak or an extreme tweak. It's called the subtle tweak. So good stuff, Doug, real good stuff. And, I go back and real short, and then we'll get into our picks, folks. But it's good for you to understand where we came from. I talked about this morning my early start in sports betting and how it developed as a child. Actually, at 6, 7 years old is where really the foundation occurred. And I always had a love for it from that time on, and just developed more and more, and to the point we are where we are right now. But one of the vivid memories I look back on, we all have our sparkling moments since we've been public, right? And mine was back in 2003. I had just started in the industry as a public figure in 2002. I've been doing it much longer than that. But in terms of actually professional sports handicapper online, I started in 2002. And my mentor at that time was Mark Lawrence. I had met with him in Florida. I worked hand in hand with him. At one point, I thought I was going to work for him. That didn't pan out. But I'm better off for it, not because I didn't want to work for Mark, but because I developed a career. But what I took away from those meetings were just irreplaceable, invaluable. Some of the stuff that I picked up from him. And one of the things I remember vividly, Doug, is sitting at his kitchen table in Western Florida and convincing him I was good enough to be on his website. Now, I wasn't even a year into the business, and Mark was real particular at that time on who he brought on, and sales were plentiful, and he had this big reputation, and most of the guys on his site that weren't working in his office were high caliber, big brand names. I said, I'll tell you what. You put me on your website, and if I don't win your Wise Guy contest, then you could take me off. So he laughed, he scoffed, and rightfully so, right? And being new. And he said, let me tell you, I've been in this contest for the last 15 years. It's difficult. I've only been in the top 5 a couple times. I said, I will win it. So he agreed. And in 2003, I was in the it was an invitational at that time. Not everybody was invited. There was 45 guys. All were doing it full time. And I ended up, there was 3 portions of the contest. There was the best bet portion. You picked a best bet every week, accounted for 2 points. And then you also had a 1-point pick every week. That's how the competition ran. And they added up whatever. If you went 2-0, you accumulated 3 points that week. And then it was a cumulative figure as you went on. But the best bet portion of the contest, whoever accumulated the most points in that portion of the contest was part of the prize money. And then the other part was the last 4 weeks of the contest. So there was 18 weeks throughout the course of the contest. And what that did is gave guys incentive that were realistically out of any contention to be in the top 5, to give them an incentive to continue and maybe make a last gasp effort of making money, again, using the 1 and 2 point formula. And then the big part of the contest that paid the most was who had the most cumulative points overall throughout the contest. Well, I won all 3 portions of the contest.
Oh, wow.
15-3 on the best bets. I killed it in the last 4 weeks. And it was between me and a guy named TJ Morgan who was in Mark's office at the time. And we were tied going in. And I vividly remember the game that won it for me. And everybody thought I was crazy. Minnesota Vikings were in a must-win situation to qualify for the playoffs. And they were playing the Arizona Cardinals at Arizona. Minnesota was laying 7. And at that time, even though Arizona wasn't very good, they were a very good home dog, even at that time. And I went with Arizona, and the game ended up going overtime, and Arizona won the game outright, and Vikings didn't even make the playoffs. So that was my clincher. But that's a vivid memory, because without that, I don't know if I am where I am today. I don't know if I'm sitting here with you. So any special memory before we get to the picks that comes out to you just off the top of your head?
Yeah, nothing certainly of that. I guess the only thing I even had would be comparable. I was in now this was college basketball. It was Duke, North Carolina for the ACC championship, and I was at a third party site that to monitor, and so I was ahead by 1 game over somebody else. No clue. And the guy that had the site, he sent me an email. I said, hey, if you don't make a pick, you'll win. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I go, I'm going to make a pick. I said, I've come this far. It's ACC championship. No, I'm making it. I made it. And I honestly don't remember who I had, Duke or North Carolina, but I do know it was right. And I ended up winning that particular year, the college basketball on that third-party monitor. So that's the one thing that comes to mind.
And I'm sure if you gave it more thought and I gave you time to prepare, you'd have a lot more, but that's a great story. And if you know anything about Doug, which like I do, I never played sports with Doug, but I can guarantee you one thing. We both have the same mentality. We're extremely competitive. And that doesn't mean we want anybody else to fail. We just want to be the best. And I could tell you from when I used to play basketball as an undersized point guard, and that I would want to rip your heart out if you were playing against me. But guys used to tell me, I can't believe you're the same guy off the field that you're on the field. And it's just the competitive nature in which we got instilled in us, and that's what makes us who we are. And I mean that as a compliment to you, Doug. Because I'm describing myself as well, and it would be counterproductive to me to put myself down. In any event, let's get to the baseball picks for Tuesday, the 25th. And I signed these games Sunday afternoon this week, and I thought I gave Doug a real good matchup in the Atlanta Braves and the Boston Red Sox. Unfortunately, Boston is not listing a starting pitcher right now. It's the old undecided. And Arizona,
he's undefeated by.
Oh yeah, you try to get his baseball card. It'll be a good one. Anyway, and Charlie Morton is the slated starting pitcher for the Atlanta Braves. I saw an 8.5 as a total on DraftKings, but like Doug said, I'm not so sure that's even correct. So he's got an interesting take on it, even though he's been backed into a corner here. And I got full confidence he's going to make sense of all this.
Well, I'll certainly talk about it. Well, I'll let everybody else decide if it'll make sense or not, from that standpoint. But hey, Atlanta continues the road trip, like Ross said, going to Beantown to face their AL partner, Boston. And now what I mean by partner, every team has a partner, okay, in Major League Baseball. Now they play 2 games at one park and 2 games at the other. So they play 4 games every year. So these first 2 games are going to be at Fenway Park. Later in the season, they're going to play 2 at Truist Field down in Atlanta. Now, the Braves, of course, as you know, have the best record in baseball, 64-34, and they take it one step further, going on the road at 32-15. Now, though Texas and the Dodgers actually score a few more runs, top to bottom, for my money, Atlanta has the best lineup in the sport, able to score runs in so many ways. Atlanta, first in home runs, first in slugging percentage, and also in OPS, second in batting average and in on-base percentage, and they're 10th in stolen bases. So this team is they put so much pressure on opposing defenses. They're really, really fun to watch. Now, Boston is tied with the Yankees in the AL East. They're two games behind Toronto for the last wild card spot. Now, the Red Sox are a solid 28-23 at home, outscoring the opposition by more than half a run per game. Red Sox come into this game 3rd in home scoring at 5.6 runs per game. As Ross mentioned, we don't know who the starting pitcher for Boston is going to be. I think it's going to be Nick Pivetta coming off the IL. At least that's what some of the reports I've read has. So whether it's Pivetta or anyone else, it doesn't make any difference to me, to be perfectly honest. I like Charlie Morton in Atlanta on the money line in this one. Morton's 8-1 lifetime against the Red Sox. His ERA is a little bit high at 4.07, but Boston comes into this one this season 4-14 in home games in interleague play. Now, besides that, I'll throw one more thing at you. Okay, we don't have a total other than a guess, but right now, if the total in this game ends up being under 10, which I think is a possibility, I'm going to suggest to go over the total because these 2 teams score a lot of runs in home road scenarios. So I'm going to give that out. So Atlanta on the money line and over anything that's below 10.
There you go. I mean, talk about a guy who's taken an almost impossible situation to handicap and turning it into a positive in a convincing manner. Doug has done so. So he likes, if the total is under 10 or under, he likes the over. and he also likes Atlanta on the money line, and he's probably estimating if Pivetta is a starting pitcher, it'll be a reasonable number because Atlanta's on the road. So there you have it, folks. Keep an eye on that. And again, keep in mind, we're taping 24 hours in advance, and sometimes it puts us in precarious positions, but we're not making excuses. So there you have it. All right. I'm going to look at the game between the Cincinnati Reds and the Milwaukee Brewers. It'll be Andrew Abbott, the young left-hander for the Cincinnati Reds, against Corbin Burnes for the Milwaukee Brewers. Boy, I really love Abbott. I know you do too, Doug. Yep. Young left-hander who's done nothing but sparkle since he's came up from the minors this year. But, there's a little bit of a vulnerability here when I look at Abbott in this particular spot. He's made 2 starts against Milwaukee recently, one on the 7th and one on the 15th of the month. In those 2 starts, he allowed 4 home runs and 10 1/3 innings pitched. And he did have his worst outing of his career against Milwaukee back on the 7th of July. And this Cincinnati bullpen on the road, they're not horrible on the road, but uninspiring would be a better word, Doug. 4.42 ERA and 145 whip. And as we know, it's been sort of an erratic year for Cincinnati. They'll go through stretches of 7 to 10 games where they're lights out from the bullpen, and then other stretches within that same parameter where their ERA is over 8 and they allow 7 or 8 home runs. So something to keep an eye on. And also, Milwaukee has owned the Reds this year. They're going 8-2 against Cincinnati. Corbin Burnes is starting to look like the Cy Young winner of years ago, or past years, of recent years, whatever you want to tab that is. As over his last 4 starts, the Brewers are 4-0, and he's a major reason why. During that course of time, a 1.44 ERA, a 0.68 whip, striking out 36 batters in 27 innings pitched. And by the way, that is a 6.7 innings per outing average, which nowadays is eye-opening because we're in an era of specialization. You get a guy that's averaging over 6 innings pitched per game or per start this year. It's a rarity more than a norm. And the Milwaukee bullpen, the last 7 games, a 1.25 ERA and 0.83 whip. They just been completely lights out. And speaking of Burnes, he's faced Cincinnati 3 times this year. The Brewers have gone 3-0 in those games, and a 2.50 ERA and 0.94 whip to accompany those 3 starts, as well as 26 strikeouts and 18 innings pitched. I'm going to go with Milwaukee here. Now, folks, if you've been following me for a while, and Doug knows this, I don't like getting over that minus 140 threshold. But I'm also not willing to lay a 1.5 here. And I really like the matchup, the way I described it for Milwaukee to come out on top. So right now I'm going to take Milwaukee minus 145. If by chance this goes to 150 or more and the run line number comes down to maybe 140 or 135, somewhere in that area, then I may entertain going on the run line. Again, folks, we're taping 24 hours in advance. So these are the predicaments that we're in sometime. But like I said earlier, neither one of us is going to make any excuses if our picks don't come through because of that factor. In any event, Doug, tell the folks what you got going on and maybe some hot streaks that you're on right now.
Well, first of all, I just as we're speaking, I saw a helicopter go over, and what you said that you're willing to go minus 145. I thought it was an emergency helicopter coming to rescue you.
Yeah,
but no. So okay, so we're good on that. So yeah, in particular, like I said, Major League Baseball props, okay, just have been dialed in now for a while. I think it's about 5 weeks, 16-8 recently, 66.6%, and hit 4 in a row on those. I actually have 2 of them going on Monday. I for sure will have, some best bets coming up this week as I find things that I really like. So that's good. Canadian Football League, had a tough push. Okay. My team had British Columbia. They had 4 turnovers in the game. They got it. They're right there. Just the 4 turnovers killed them. But hey, those things happen. Still 5-2 recently, 8-3 from that standpoint, and looking to make some changes. Baseball just, I had a nice stretch, and I've given a lot of it back. Disappointed by that, but you know what? We still got 2 months to go, and very determined to make something happen here, Ross.
Yeah, and Doug is similar to me. If you go through a bad stretch, you can almost count on a torrid run coming. And I know Doug, I've been working with him for years now. We go back from the beginning. We started around the same time, and that's his history. And I have just as much confidence in him as I have in myself, if that's possible. Anyway, you could find me at gamblersworld.net. By the way, that is our sponsor, Gamblers World. There's 2 portions of the site, gamblersworld.com, which shows all the videos of everything on this channel. Not only that, Jesse Schul doing his own videos. Also, Doug is videos from Doc Sports. I mean, he's up there on a regular basis. And also Sean Higgs, another guest here and handicapper at gamblersworld.net. His midday money show you could find at gamblersworld.com. Gamblersworld.net, unfortunately, because Doug is under contract with Docs, and that's fine. But we keep him on because he's been with us from the beginning. He does a terrific job. Doug could be on this show, like I said before, as long as he wants to be. And you could find me over at gamblersworld.net along with 9 other great handicappers. And folks, the best part about the site too, not only are you have a lot of great handicappers on the roster, but if you happen to not make a profit on a single game, multi-game daily package, or any subscription of 30 days or less, we will credit your account. Not give you back your money, but credit your account, and you could use that money anytime you wish at on any handicapper you wish. So if you're a guy who does college football and the NFL on Saturday and Sunday, and that's all you like to do, you happen to lose on a Sunday and you get a credit, you can use that the following weekend or even 2 weeks or a month from now, whatever you prefer. So a lot of assurances there, guarantees there. And again, you can find Doug over at docsports.com and our sponsor, Gamblers World, gamblersworld.com, and our pick site at gamblersworld.net. We ask you to visit. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, I don't know what you're waiting for. Right there, there's a WC logo on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Just click on that, hit the subscribe button. And I would advise you go into your YouTube settings and hit that alert notification bell. And immediately upon us publishing any of our Winner Circles podcast on our Winner Circle Sports Betting channel, you'll get notified. And you don't have to keep coming back and forth. Until the next time, for Doug Upstone and Ross Benjamin, we like to wish each and every one of you all the very best. I'll be back tomorrow with Sean Higgs and Jesse Schul. Doug will be back with us on Thursday with Chip Chirimbus. Take care, folks.